Airing on Asheville FM 103.3 LPFM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. This week we're sharing an interview with Ángel, an ICE detainee currently incarcerated at Otero Detention Center in New Mexico. Ángel is a trans-masculine lesbian of Mapuche heritage whose family moved her to the U.S. from Chile at the age of 7 and has lived undocumented since, attaining DACA status under Obama. Following the 2020 George Floyd Uprising, she pled guilty to charges related to arson of police vehicles in Little Rock, Arkansas, serving 15 months before moving to Chicago, where she was eventually detained by ICE. Approaching 30 years old, the majority of which has been in the so-called USA, Ángel made the hard choice to waive the right to fight deportation and has been in detention centers since, on her way to being sent back to Chile to join her mother and her family now living there. For the hour, Ángel speaks about conditions at Prairieland and Otero detention centers, the conditions of her fellow prisoners, the hurdles they face in access to healthcare, quality food, clean facilities, medical care, legal resources, access to communications with their families, ability to communicate needs and demands with staff and guards who only speak English, and other topics. You can check our show notes for a link to her GoFundMe for supporting her once she's on the other side in Chile, and some other interviews she's given during detention. If you want to learn more about 2020 Uprising prisoners, you can check out our interviews in 2022 and 2023, linked in the show notes, with some of the people that are running uprisingsupport.org or supporting uprising prisoners, which is, again, linked in the show notes.
Yeah, so I Ángel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an ICE detainee currently incarcerated in Otero Processing Center in New Mexico, about 30 miles from the Mexican border. After doing about 15 months in the BOP, ICE came and picked me up, so I've done about a month and a few more days here. I'm trans. I am a Chilean national with Mapuche heritage, and English and Spanish speaker, which is very important, being an ICE detainment where most people don't speak English. So yeah.
Cool, thank you. And I definitely wanted to ask you about the role that you've played in some facilities in relation to and just what the reality is for folks that are struggling to get back to their families or to their homes without access to language to be able to even argue for things. But I wanted to ask a few more questions about the conditions there, if you don't mind. First, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself and navigating your citizenship status in the U.S.?
So, being a Chilean national, I came to the States when I was 6 years old on a B2 tourist visa. That was only good for about 2 or 3 weeks, and obviously my family overstayed that visa because there was virtually no life in Chile for us. It was very difficult to raise a family, so my parents brought me here, and I was raised in Arkansas. It wasn't until relatively recent, in Obama's administration, where DACA was permitted, which is a deferred action for childhood arrivals, which allows us to work and go to school legally. So that changed me. I was able to work. I was able to receive, taxes, that kind of thing, with paying a $500 displacement of an American worker fee, every 2 years that I had to pay for. So I've been in the States now 22 years. It's been nearly impossible to become a citizen or a resident. It's very expensive to hire a lawyer, and then meeting all the conditions and criteria in order to even be eligible for that process is really difficult. So the only method I had left to me was marriage, and when I tried to do that, not only was the lawyer extremely expensive. I was asked for $10,000 to help with the green card process, but the petitions themselves, the forms, all of that is really expensive, and it costs anything from $100 to thousands, depending on the forms, the trips themselves. I have to go to, spend money at biometrics appointments out of the state, things like that. And ultimately, that process was ended because of the charges that I picked up during the 2020 uprising with Black Lives Matter, which I do not regret doing what I did. It just goes to show how evil this system is. It doesn't matter how much you've done for your community or what kind of a person that you are, and especially under the Trump administration, it's damn near impossible for anybody to create a life, and even citizens. But in regards to immigrants, I'm surrounded by people that have, been seeking asylum, getting their temporary protected status, getting their visas, and they just regularly go to ICE to, meet with their ICE agents or whoever to continue on their process. But under the Trump administration, every single person has been getting picked up, including most people here have never seen the inside of jails and are very, everybody's pretty scared. They've lost their homes, their houses. They don't know where their kids are at. So it's a pretty intense environment to be in every day.
Could you talk a little bit about if those pathways to citizenships were so hard to navigate, or were so full of having to reframe your day-to-day life as a working class person and also navigate these things? Luckily, you're fluent in English, but could you speculate a little bit about why you think it's set up in such a way to be so difficult for working class people?
Oh yeah, definitely. Whenever I was navigating all these different pathways, I found that most pathways are very specific. For example, the temporary protected status, you have to meet certain criteria where you have to have proof of somebody's trying to kill you, or a group is oppressing your group or your community through, I have no idea what kinds of evidence, but groups like that typically don't even have access to phones or printers or anything like that. So it's really difficult to prove that kind of stuff. Then there's straight up just like racist pathways where it's like you have to be of an extraordinary talent in order to apply, which very few people meet that criteria. You have to be like a literal famous person or an extremely successful professional sports player or something like that in order to apply for residency or green card or that kind of thing. Then there's like asylum, which to my understanding the law requires you to physically surrender yourself at the U.S. border, which a lot of people, the rhetoric in the right wing specifically, but it's to my understanding that most Americans have this misguided understanding that you have to, as an immigrant, you have to come to the U.S. in the right way, which they frown upon people that just show up at the border and are trying to come in. They're like, no, you have to do it the right way. The vast majority of immigrants don't. Well, I mean, I don't know, but a lot of immigrants don't have access to lawyers or computers, to be able to apply. You have to go out of your way. A lot of people come from the countryside, are seeking a better life there. These are very poor people usually that will do anything to have a better life, including walking 3 days through a desert that, you're risking your life. They will send their kids with coyotes so they can have safer passage with people that they don't know, giving all of their earnings and savings to people that they also don't know might harm their own family. So, let alone coming the right way, the way that it's imagined here in America, is a really difficult process in these other countries. And besides that, asylum law requires you to physically show yourself at the border, which I don't think a lot of Americans understand. That the right way is actually the way that immigrants are showing up. And most immigrants willingly that I've met here in detention centers actually do give themselves willingly at the border because that they believe that they're doing the right thing, that ICE is going to help them, that America is going to help them, that this is what we've all heard that America will do for us. But once we get here, it's a much different story. There have been people sitting here for months without being able to see a judge, seeing an ICE agent. We're just kind of in these big boxes in barely livable conditions, wondering where we're going to go, where our kids are at, what's going to happen to us is the constant question on everybody's mind. And so navigating these pathways of becoming legal are, I believe, very intentionally designed to keep people out. And throughout the years, they've only gotten worse, especially for people from Latin American countries. Now, under the Trump administration, I see that it's basically everybody. There's people from every continent here, and while most people are from Latin American countries, people here have spent so much time, especially the immigrants that are from non-Latin American countries, which are referred to as less common countries, make up such a good chunk of the population that here in particular in this detention center, Africans, Romanians, Egyptians, all kinds of different people actually have learned Spanish. That's the amount of time that people are spending in here waiting for their deportations or seeing a judge or the next step in this process, which most people know by now that nobody's being able to get out on bond or get their asylum granted. Most people, the vast majority, get deported. I've yet to see someone be released on bond or be released because they were granted asylum. And I've met hundreds of people in the detention centers I've been at.
My understanding is that you're not legally going to challenge your deportation. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the majority of people around you are planning to, as I understand, the ones that you talk to at least, who either speak English or Spanish, are in fact planning to resist legally. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say the majority are fighting their cases, but there's a few that have spent enough time in ICE detention where they just kind of like, okay, I've been here 10 months and I don't want to fight any longer, so they just gave up and asked for their deportation, which is a lot quicker, but still a lengthy process that takes several months. If you're lucky, like a month and a half for the deportation. But otherwise, most people have, and especially depending on your country, most people spend several months. Sometimes the better part of a year. I've met people that have been in detention for even 2 years.
Just to jump to the subject of conditions then, because you're already talking about it, at the facility that you're at, or the prior detention center, Prairieland, could you describe what conditions are like access to food, to drinking water, the amount of space, or like I've read, for instance, where in some facilities there will be like a housing block that's meant for 25 women and it's being used for 250 women, so people are having to sleep in shifts. Could you talk a bit about the material conditions there?
Absolutely. This is honestly one of the most egregious, horrible things that I've seen, especially with men, because there's far more men that are detained than women that I've seen. For example, in Prairieland, When I arrived, I was taken to medical with a group of women, I want to say about 20. The little medical room probably sat 5. So most of us had to stand or sit on the floor, but while we were going into this room, that same size room that sat about 5 people, we passed by the same size room that was for men, and there was like at least 50 men in there. They were so crammed that they couldn't even sit down. There were some that were standing up sleeping, kind of resting their head on other men's shoulders. And the men's dorms are way more overcrowded. But the dorms in Prairieland, I think they sat about 30 people max. There was never a time that I was detained in Prairieland where there was less than 30 people. It was usually, the highest was like 70. So most people were sleeping on the floor, which is not allowed, but still happens. And so I can only imagine what the men's dorms are like. And a lot of people were just sleeping on the floor. There were times where the facility ran out of mats, so people were just sleeping directly on the floor with just a thin little blanket. And I experienced that myself whenever I was being transferred over here to Otero and Blue Bonnet. We were forced to sleep in a holding cell, basically the equivalent of a drunk tank, just straight up on the floor, not even blankets. They didn't feed us. There were several times in Prairieland as well where we weren't fed, especially during transfers. During the holy month of Ramadan, the Palestinian woman that was in my dorm, she had to fight every single day for her halal food. And there were several nights where she went hungry because the kitchens were like, oh, we're closed now, it's too late, we forgot, so you're not going to eat. So that happened several times. The guards will tell us that water is a privilege because they're supposed to, on every shift, lug in this cooler that has a little spout at the bottom. It's like a normal cooler that you would see like that you'd bring to, like those coolers that football players will drink out of and like dunk on their coaches after a game. It's about that same size cooler for like, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 women. So that cooler will run out of water pretty quickly. And whenever we demand more water, the guards at Prairieland were very disrespectful and very unprofessional and would say things like, water is a privilege. We don't even really need to be bringing this jug to you. You can drink out of the sink. And the sinks obviously have dirty, hard water, and our sinks barely work. The 9 out of 10 of them dribbled just barely any water, and the one that did work was really, really dirty, clearly. And so we'd have to like microwave the water really hot until a boiling point, and then put the cup down, and so that would be our drinking water whenever the jug water wasn't available. The food at Prairieland was very little. I often got rotten. But yeah, I often got like rotten lettuce, and there were times where like there would be ants on my bread, and whenever I reported, they'd be like, well, that's your food. A guard even told me once, they're being nice to y'all. We don't even really have to give you this much food. It's not meant to fill you up. You should be grateful. So there were, the living conditions were awful, just terrible. Now here in Otero, living conditions are a little better. As in Prairieland, it was filthy. Otero's cleaner. However, the privacy is non-existent. In Prairieland, I was able to shower in a closed stall. Even though the showers were filthy, reeked, the water would come back up through the drains, and, everybody had, like, athlete's foot from just how dirty everything was, even if you wore shower shoes. here in Otero, the showers are completely open as well as the bathroom stalls. So when you go into the bathroom, you see everybody taking a shower. You see everybody doing their business on the toilet or whatever they're doing. So for someone like me who's trans, who has a bit of a different body than everyone else here, it's really difficult to feel safe in the bathroom because of everybody's looking at me, everybody makes comments at my body, and some of the girls will think that they're joking or playing with me, but in fact it's like it's sexual harassment. So but in order to survive here and not give otherwise good people serious charges, charges, I just kind of have to be like, no, like, quit playing or whatever, and I'm just kind of, it's just an awkward situation where everybody's completely exposed, and every shred of dignity and respect that they could have taken from us is taken. Like, they could have built stalls, they could have just put up even just curtains, and they just decided not to kind of keep us dehumanized and feeling like aliens, No, we're not really treated better than livestock, although I will say that Otero's guards are not so blatantly racist or disrespectful like the ones at Prairieland. In Prairieland, I mean, the guards would like flip you off, they would stick their tongue out at you, they would taunt you, they would refuse to honor rights, like when we'd ask for a lieutenant or a higher rank to come and solve an issue, they would make fun of you. I've heard of when there was a woman asking during transport, she was like, "Where am I going? Can I please speak to my husband? I don't know where my kids are at. What's going on?" And the guard looked at her and was like, "Oh, don't worry, your husband got deported and he's got a new wife and kids now. You don't even have to worry about him." And laughed. And obviously this woman was brought to tears and just emotionally distraught. We all had to comfort her for hours during this transport while this man that works for ICE just got enjoyment from seeing all of this torment. And I would say that's the attitude of about like 80 to 90% of all the guards that I've come in contact with, especially in Prairieland. I would say about 100% of the guards have that attitude there. And your ICE agents barely come see you. If they do see you, or if they do respond to any requests that you put on the tablet for an appointment or knowledge about your case at all, they'll tell you, "Oh, I'll get back to you," and then they almost never do. You have every single thing that you receive in a detention center is very hard fought for. In Prairieland, in my dorm, nobody spoke English. Nobody that was Spanish speaking spoke English, which was the majority of the dorm. So I was the translator. They even started calling me the abogadito. Abogadito means the little lawyer, because I was fighting tooth and nail for every single person. I was on the tablet constantly filing grievances and requests for everybody, because they didn't know how to maneuver an English tablet. Even though that the guards had interpreter services on their phones available to us, they would barely move a finger for us to get water, let alone an interpreter service, so they would actually, there'd be posters all around that ICE agents and the guards are here to help, but they were the exact opposite of that. They were like huge blocks that you have to fight against constantly and risk charges or your processes being, like your case process being in jeopardy if you did stand up to these guards. I was constantly threatened with mace, with being put in segregation, almost every other day, I would say. We had to organize hunger strikes for some serious problems to be resolved. So yeah, that's just some of the stuff that we had to go through as detainees in a detention center.
Yeah, that's insane. Thank you for sharing that. The way it sounds like these operations that the federal government are running are picking up people when they're on their way to or from work, like retenes or roadblocks or whatever, or just ambushing people and sweeping them up, including people that are citizens or that have green cards or that have documentation, as we've seen with the folks that are being shipped down to El Salvador. As you mentioned, people who are not in contact with their loved ones, with their co-parents, the people that they're co-parenting with, I mean, maybe elders that they're taking care of, maybe children. And if they're not given the ability to navigate that because there's, the services are only in English, let alone the other possibly expensive methods of, getting on GTL to make calls or, having the numbers available to you to the outside, or lawyer access that isn't being offered. It sounds like it's a really frightening circumstance for anyone there. I guess another element of this is that if you're picked up on your way to work or on your way to pick up your kids, you're not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm going to pack up my medication that I need for an extended period of time since I'm going to be going away. Do you have any anecdotes or experiences that you could share about either you or other people's medical conditions or access to necessary medicines while they're on the inside?
Oh yeah, there have definitely been a lot of people that I've met, and even myself being on testosterone, there have been people that I've met where women have just had babies and they got picked up by ICE. Oh my God, there's so many stories I could tell. I don't know where to start. But for example, there was a woman who had just had a newborn baby and was picked up by ICE at the hospital because, I don't know, maybe a racist staff member didn't like the fact that she didn't speak English, but she had just had her newborn child and was brought to ICE detention and she had a C-section. And she could barely move, she could barely, and this was at Prairieland, which is, I remind you, filthy. I mean, they don't do anything whenever you get taken to intake. Not only is everybody's property strewn all over the place, but it's dirty. There's filth, like cups and sporks and food crumbles and God knows what else. And part of the intake process is you go to medical. In medical, there are signs posted everywhere that's like, be COVID safe, and here are the guidelines, wash your hands, and this is the medical room, the medical intake room, so every time that there's a group in here, you have to clean after every group. And clearly, that room had not been cleaned in months. There was a toilet in that room that you could use as because you wait there for hours. And it was smeared with feces. There was blood spatters all over it, all around the floor. And it smelled horrible. It was clearly that room had not been cleaned in months. I would be surprised if they had cleaned it any sooner than that. So the medical process is painfully slow, and they tell you that they can't do anything for you. The only thing that they can do is extract your teeth and give you ibuprofen for any pain, and that's basically the extent of the medical attention that they give you. This woman that had the C-section could barely move around, and she was barked at with no discrimination as to her situation, just like the rest of us were. And even though that she had just had her child and she didn't know if her child was okay, if her loved ones were able to take care of her other children, and she was asking to be released on bond, ICE didn't come see her. Nobody tried to help her to push up her court date so that she could be released sooner on bond. And eventually they just transferred her to some other place, and we never heard from her again. So I don't know what's going on with her, but there are other people that have serious medical issues. Like, there was a woman that I was incarcerated with that I ended up in the same dorm at Prairieland. She's an older Chinese woman with cancer, and she went to Carswell because it's a medical facility. And when she was taken to Prairieland, she still had procedures that were regularly scheduled for her, having bladder cancer. And ICE and the Prairieland Detention Center just basically told her, well, you're going to have to wait. And she was like, I really need this procedure because, her health was in question here. She would get sicker. She sometimes couldn't eat. She sometimes couldn't get out of bed. She tried to take the best care of herself that she could. We all tried to help as much as we could, but it was 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months before she was ever taken to the hospital. And to our knowledge, was finally given her procedure at an outside hospital, but that was after she had gotten really sick. And we'd gone on a hunger strike to demand, not just for her, but for multiple people's, like, extremely time-sensitive issues. And I was transferred during the time that she was taken out, so I never got to hear back from her about how she's been doing or how the procedure went for her. But on a smaller scale, for me as a trans person, every time I've been to a detention center, and I've been to 4, every single time that I've been to a detention center, they segregate me from the group. So when I got to Prairieland, I was segregated for 2 days in a medical room where I was not given any toilet paper. They skipped meals because they thought they had fed me, and I had told them no, and they were like, okay, well, too bad, because it says here that we did feed you, so you're not going to eat. I wasn't allowed to take a shower. There was no shower that they would take me to for 2 days, and whenever I was like, well, the BOP, whenever I was released from the BOP, they gave me 2 vials of testosterone, and a lieutenant told me, oh, we don't administer that here. And I was like, you can't just cold turkey cut me off of my hormone replacement therapy. That's just inhumane. And she was like, well, it's Trump's executive orders. And I was like, well, Trump's executive orders were blocked by the Supreme Court, so it's really up to the facility's discretion to continue these medical treatments, and you're not a doctor. And she was like, well, we're not going to. Well, this facility doesn't do that. So this lieutenant tried to step on the medical department's toes and tell me something that, I guess, to intimidate me or break my spirit or something, or just be a general asshole. And not to mention that this lieutenant was also a very proud lesbian. She didn't care about me, somebody who would otherwise share community with her in that aspect, being a lesbian myself. And Latina, I mean, we shared many intersections, and she still treated me like I was undeserving of medical treatment. But eventually I caused enough trouble where I talked to some nurses who thankfully are contracted outside of ICE, and I think I just got lucky, and they pushed for me seeing a doctor. The doctor was like, okay, you've been continuing this medication for a while, we'll continue you on this medication. And so they kept me going on testosterone finally, but it wasn't for like 2 weeks that they didn't give my shot. And I was actually transferred out of Prairieland on this last Friday, which was a day for my injections. And while I was being transferred, I was like, can you call medical, and just give me my shot? It will literally take like 2 minutes. And they were like, no, if it's important enough, medical will pull you out, but otherwise you can wait. And so it was the same attitude at every other facility. And when I finally got to Otero 2 days later, I had to wait 2 weeks and go through that whole process of fighting for my testosterone again. Being told that they wouldn't administer it to me, that they don't do that here, and so I had to fight. for literally everything that is deserving. Like medical attention in a detention center is something that is also you have to fight extremely hard for. You have to expend all your resources, file complaints, talk to the officers, and when you see a lieutenant walking by, you have to say something to them and become enough of a pain in their side for them to be like, okay, it's more trouble to just ignore you, so we're going to actually give you what you've been asking for. And that's the general attitude.
Like, I know this is an issue that people have talked about at the Northwestern Detention Center and, up outside of Tacoma. But it's been that it's a privately run facility run by geo groups. But you've described dealing with ICE employees as guards, it sounds like. But also that there's these contracted medical professionals at times. Is your experience in these facilities is it different according to the facility? Are you mostly dealing with federal employees or are you dealing with contractors?
So at these facilities, we mostly deal with contractors. The people that are the housing unit officers are like contracted security officers. ICE themselves, like the ICE agents, they just deal with your case from an office, basically. And they're around in the building, and sometimes you'll see them, sometimes they show up. It was very rare in Prairieland, but here in Otero, it's kind of regular that an ICE representative or agent comes and asks people like, okay, what do you want to know about your case? They'll like scan your ID and tell you, okay, like we're waiting on this paperwork, or your next court date is on so-and-so date. In my personal experience with this Otero ICE agent meetings that they have here where they come and visit like once or twice a week, I've been told that I'll be responded to on my ICE request on the tablet with all the questions that I have, but that has yet to happen. And all my ICE requests on the tablet since I've gotten here have been ignored. So yeah, it's a very slow process, and you have to take every chance you get to get one little piece of information. So yeah, seeing the actual ICE agents is very rare, but most people are contracted that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So all the lieutenants, all the corrections officers, those are all contracted. The medical team is also contracted, and it just kind of depends on the facility that you're at too, because I'm not sure if it's a guard that's cooking our food, but they have like little chef suits, so I don't know if maybe they contracted some sort of chef that cooks for detained people, because the food here in Otero is much better than Prairieland. But I mean, it's not great, but it's definitely an upgrade from other detention centers. But yeah, I think it just would vary from detention center to detention center, but I would say normally most people that you're dealing with are contracted.
So we've got about 10 more minutes on this call, if it's an hour. Do you want to address the question of like your deportation, what you're leaving behind, or do you want to try to get some of the folks around you on the call? I don't know if you're able to get to do that there, but you've sounded interested in doing that before.
That would be really cool. I'm not sure who can speak English, though.
Yeah, that's cool. But also, if somebody does want to speak, if they speak kind of slowly, I can get someone to translate and do a voiceover, at least for the podcast version, if you want that. But it, if that sounds complicated, we could work out a separate call some other time with a little more planning.
Definitely. I'd be very down to help you with that. There's definitely people that have expressed interest in speaking to y'all, but the majority of them are Spanish speakers. They know a limited amount of English, but also there's other people from other countries that don't speak Spanish that I think I would really love to uplift their voices, since they don't get heard even as much as the Spanish speakers do.
Maybe get someone who could speak French, speakers of Mandarin or Creole, that sort of thing, or others sometimes beyond that?
Like a lot of Russians, Romanians, people from many different countries in Africa that speak many different languages. There are some indigenous people from all kinds of different countries that speak their native language. Mandarin. There are people from Georgia, and there's all kinds of people from all over the world here, and some I haven't been able to talk to that I don't know what language they speak, but I would love to be able to get their stories out as well.
Yeah, well then, I guess if we don't have the time, and I would do that too, like if we had the time, but it would just be an extra process for finding someone who could speak that language to be able to translate. But I'd be down to try. I do have a lot of comrades that do translation work in various languages. I guess then, as a final question for this conversation, could I ask you in these last few minutes, at least, if you're not fighting your deportation, like you just got finished with time in federal prison after the 2020 uprising, and then you got swept up into ICE detention towards deportation. I know you've had a lot of time incarcerated in the United States at the end of your stay, but I mean, 22 years of being in this country has to have built a lot of memories, a lot of relationships, a lot of affinity. I wonder if you wouldn't mind speaking a bit about like some of the things and the people that you're leaving behind that you have, or anything that you like feel comfortable talking about, and also what awaits you when you get to Chile.
Yeah, of course. I'm very sad to leave all my relationships, all my family, my community here in the United States. I lost my relationship. I lost my communities, like my housing, even my dog. I have to leave behind. All the community work that I've done, everybody that I know, everything that I've ever known, I've had to leave behind. And I feel very heartbroken about that. However, I also feel really grateful for my community and my loved ones for showing me undying support. A lot of these people too are people that I've never even met, but I've had such an immense pouring of love and support in any way that people can offer me. So I've now, towards the end of my incarceration and processing all of these emotions that I've been feeling, I mostly feel like great gratitude toward all the people that I have to leave behind. I feel excited to meet my family too, although I'm also scared of how my countrymen and how my family will receive me, because I left as a little girl in a dress, and I'm coming back like a super radical butch lesbian auntie, So I'm thankful that my mom, my immediate family, has kind of come around to accepting me, but I'm still a little afraid of how the rest of my community will receive me. But my hopes are high, and I know that I'll be all right. That even my community here has reached out to any community in Chile that travels back and forth from the U.S. that they've been able to talk to make sure that I have people that I could speak English with, or gay and trans people that I could talk to that are also Chilean, so that I'm not a complete like fish out of water in my own country. So it's a lot of emotions. It's a lot of grief and anger that I feel every day. It's a whirlwind of emotions, but being incarcerated has made me incredibly resilient, because I've had my worst nightmares have come true, you know, and I can't lose my head. I can't lose my mind in a time that is so dark in my life. I have to remain strong, and as a revolutionary, this is the path that I've chosen to take, and I don't regret a single thing that I've done, because all of it I would give up in the name for liberation of all people. And I'm also grateful that I got the chance to help so many people here in detention that otherwise would have been pushed to the side if they didn't happen to have a translator or somebody that was just willing to risk a lot, you know. And I'm grateful that I get to take that role, and I know that I'll see all of this pain through, and a lot of love awaits me, so I know that I'll be alright. I feel fine already, even though that there's a cacophony of emotions inside of me at all times. I know that I'm doing it for the right reasons, so ultimately I feel alright.
The Final Straw is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
Now on the Channel Zero Anarchist Podcast Network, tune into The Beautiful Idea,
a project from a collective of several anarchist and autonomous media producers scattered around the world.
We're bringing you interviews and stories from the front lines of autonomous social movements and struggles,
as well as original commentary and analysis.
Episodes include action news, interviews with frontline organizers, and deep dive discussions.
Check out thebeautifulidea.show and the Channel Zero network for more information.
If you want to support the Final Straw Radio, you can subscribe to our podcast via various platforms, follow, rate, and share our materials online, and learn more at tfsr.wtf. And if you'd like to fund our transcription work that allows for easier translation, more accessibility of content, and the zines that we produce from each interview, consider picking up some merch from us or making a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, or LibrePay, or joining our Patreon to access early release content and other goodies via the links that you can find at tfsr.wtf/support. And now some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
Okay, everybody wait. All of you who are heading to the bathroom for your traditional weekly bathroom break, you might want to hold up. This segment is not going to be my standard run-of-the-mill drivel. You're going to want to hear this. I'm about to share something that's absolutely monumental, earth-shattering, life-changing. I have figured it out. I've figured it out. So, for everyone who's been contemplating it, pondering it, struggling to make sense of it, you're going to want to take notes. I have all of the answers you've been looking for. And I don't think I'm overselling here. Not at all. So, full disclosure, before I get to it, I have to acknowledge that one of the principal criticisms that have been leveled at me is that I sometimes, perhaps, in some small way, have the tendency to oversimplify. I know, all of you regular listeners out there who do not use my segments for bathroom breaks are probably saying, "No, Swain, you've gotten everything 100% right for over 10 years of commentary. You're the Walter Cronkite of the 21st century." And I understand perfectly why you might feel that way. It's my unrivaled record at getting everything right. But that's the totally unjustified criticism, that I oversimplify. And just to be clear, this is not one of those instances. No oversimplification. It's a moment of clarity. I figured it out. All of it. So, some context. I was watching the NFL draft, and I made some ramen pizza burritos. Lots of carbs, lots of cheese. And I had cheese puffs and a carbonated beverage of a brand that I will not endorse. But just to say, lots of carbs, lots of cheese, high fructose corn syrup, and I might have eaten myself into a slight coma. And that's when it hit me, right around the 5th round on Saturday. Joy. Joy is the meaning of everything. It's the one thing that matters. That thing to pursue. Joy. And one of the principal keys to achieving joy to have meaningful and rewarding relationships. And of all relationships, the most important for us to obtain and maintain joy is in our intimate and romantic relationships, our partners or spouses. That's why there are thousands of books on how to pick the perfect partner, how to balance the perfect relationship, how to achieve meaningful relationships over the long term. Of all the books written by shrinks, more have been written on this topic than on any other. And I figured it out. You can save your money on those books, save your time on YouTube. I've got the answers right here. And it hit me in the 5th round of the NFL draft as I snoozed off with a stomach full of ramen pizza burritos and cheese puffs. And my Detroit Lions had an excellent draft, by the way, but that's another topic. So here it is. Every successful romantic, intimate relationship can be boiled down to 2 factors: laughter and orgasms. That's it, and not necessarily in that order. To maintain a successful relationship, you must focus on your partner's laughter and orgasms. Everything else is window dressing. Of course, this is assuming your partner isn't starving to death or hanging from a high wire or bursting into flames. You have to handle all of the emergency situations. You know, hand them a candy bar, pull them to safety, blast them with a fire extinguisher. Then, tell a good joke and create genital friction. But all things being equal, it boils down to laughter and orgasms. And here's why you can ignore everything else. If your partner is mad or frustrated, nothing you say or do is funny. It's just annoying. They won't laugh. And so the absence of laughter is a sign of underlying problems. Also, if your partner is in a state of unhappiness with you, the orgasms will also decrease. No one feels in the right headspace for sexual release with someone they really can't stand. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Yes. Now, skeptics out there, no doubt they're saying, here he goes again, oversimplifying. But I'm really not. I get it. We like to think that we're far more sophisticated. We're more complex. We're the top of the food chain. Our happiness cannot really be reduced to just 2 factors. But the reality is we're mammals, primates. We're chimpanzees with a little less hair on our faces and a slightly swollen cerebral cortex. That's all. And so we're not so different from our distant ancestors who were furry and stinky and fornicated in the mud, except maybe for scented candles. And to satisfy our cerebral cortexes, all we really need are some old reruns of the Three Stooges, where Moe hits Larry and Curly in the head with a hammer. Laughter, and there it is, orgasms and laughter. And to prove it, let's consider relationships without orgasms and laughter. How successful are they? Exactly. A relationship without orgasms or laughter, both of those people are trying to chew off their own feet to get out of that miserable trap. Nobody stays in that kind of hellscape, except maybe Melania Trump. So, if you want to maintain a healthy and rewarding long-term romantic relationship, you need only monitor laughter and orgasms. In fact, you can graph it. Laughter on the y-axis, orgasms on the x-axis. You can quantify the success of your relationship this way. Anytime that you see things trending toward the bottom left corner of your graph, it should alert you. More orgasms, more laughter. Maybe you watch porn. Hire a clown. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone and hire a well-hung clown. Whatever it takes to elevate the laughter and the orgasms, but not necessarily in that order and not necessarily at the same time. Simultaneous laughter and orgasms, you could pull a muscle. So there it is. Free advice on successful relationships from a guy who never maintained one. Now go out there and, well, you know. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain from the Super Duper Uber Mega Ultra Hyper Turbo Multi Maxi Max in Youngstown, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can still write Sean at his new old new again address at Sean Swain number A243205 OSP Youngstown 878 Coatesville Hubbard Road, Youngstown, Ohio 44505. You can find his past writings, updates on his case, hear his past audio, find out how to get his books, plus ways to contribute to his legal defense fund at seanswain.org. This is The Final Straw Radio. This show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. Programming support is brought to you by Firestorm Books. Located at 1022 Haywood Road in West Asheville, Firestorm is a bookstore and social movement space owned by its workers, in operation since 2008. Their event calendar and complete catalog of books can be found online at firestorm.coop.